Hi everyone, my name is XPTBOY, and you can see me playing $100 spin and goes on PokerStars. And I am a coach on Playerly, and I've made some videos there. So if you want to watch some of my content, check me out there. They also have some other good coaches. And I also have I'm also part of a stable called Nemesis Backing, where the head coaches are Monkey Boss and Nice to meet two of the best players and coaches and spins in the world. But anyways, today we're going to be doing a review of GTOBase. We're just going to go through some of the hands and see some of the features. I can say that I really like GTOBase. I've used Skiers and Insta GTO before, and so this would be uh, their competition and alternative, basically. And I think so far this is my favorite. Not necessarily because of all the features it offers. I think they could still improve a bit in that, but simply because of the solutions I believe are the most accurate. You're never really going to find too many spots where a hand is like, where a play is negative EV and GTOBase would still be doing it. And on turns and rivers, you're going to see mm, like hands barreling much less kind of randomly, but more based on suits. And it shows that the trees have been solved more accurately. And I think that's more important than any feature or usability, although this has plenty of features and usability too. So anyways, I just played like 100 games in a session today, and these are some of the hands I marked. And so I'll just show you how I kind of go through my hands. It's kind of like a daily routine, or almost daily. So we're just gonna check these out. Let me remove the HUD. And this is against the fish, so let's not look at that. Okay. So, by the way, in GTOBase, what I like to do is I just have like one heads-up page open, one small blind versus big blind open, and one button versus big blind open when I'm reviewing, and then I just check the hand. So here, I wanted to see, I guess, if I can sometimes check the flop, firstly, and secondly, how often I should be checking the turn. I think I should be checking quite frequently, and finally, he really overbet, and I guess I actually have to call, but I was wondering if I can ever fold, but I decided to be a total nit here, so let's see how my play was. We were 25 big blinds deep. No, 22 or so. Okay, so flop was 10, 10, 6, 4. And we see that we have an extremely high frequency of c-betting. We're basically not going to be checking the flop at all, and in fact we're going to be using half pot quite often. I thought that since it's a monotone flop, we'd be using usually only a quarter pot or block betting sizing, but it seems that our hands have a huge range advantage, and when we're betting for value, we just want to like get more value with them and get more protection, because even like any overpair or top pair isn't going to be that great in this situation, because like a fourth flush coming is just going to make our hand vulnerable. But anyways, we can split between half pot or block bet, which is what I did. So that seems fine. He check called. Turn was an 8 of diamonds. I believe, yeah, like he's supposed to be having some donking. The 8 is a card that I just won't be barreling too often in general. And like I'm not going to be bluffing enough, and therefore I feel like a lot of his hands are interested in donking for value, and also he can certainly be using some bluffs in his donking range. And it's going to be a small like block bet, therefore you can block bet with a much more merged range, including a lot of top pairs, even like some sixes sometimes. And the bluffs that he's going to be using are generally going to be like a flush draw plus straight draw kind of combo, which are almost all of the bluffs that he has available. At the same time, it's important to like sometimes donk with your nutted hands, but anyways, he checked. As we see, our barreling frequency is about 50% frequency, and checking with Jack 10 here is a perfectly reasonable play, as well as basically any 10. You can check with like pocket aces a ton, even pocket aces with a spade, which I probably wouldn't have been doing enough. But at the same time, I'd probably be checking pocket queens without a spade more often. And let's see how often like the second pair wants to be barreling, maybe. So second pair is basically like a pure check in this situation. So we're never going to really be trying to barrel for protection. But yeah, an interesting thing to note is that 10-9 and 10-7 are much better hands to barrel because they've got some gut shots and additional equity, but at the same time overcards aren't so great, and we do still require protection from overcards, whereas with these types of combos, not really. If we look at the offsuited combos of Jack 10, it's going to look like, yeah, with a flush draw, you're always going to be barreling. That's the general thought behind this. With all your top pairs, it's going to be much better to barrel with a flush draw simply because you've got a lot more value and equity. And you're not as afraid of getting check raised with those combos. But anyways, we decided to check, and the river was pretty blank, right? It was like, yeah, the most blank card in the deck, and I guess, yeah, so he's supposed to have some jams here. He just like overbet like 2x pot, but jamming is perfectly, I mean, that play is perfectly reasonable. So he should be using a wide variety of sizings. Basically every sizing choice would be a decent choice. I guess we should see how we react against a jam first, see if we can ever fold our hand. And it's actually quite nice to see that I didn't misplay horribly, and that I can actually be folding my 10 at around 60% frequency here. So it wasn't a massive mistake. I guess that holding a jack isn't the best because he is going to be bluffing with jack highs and queen highs quite often, whereas like king 10 and ace 10 are going to be pure calls, or almost pure calls, since they're blocking more of his bluff type of hands. We're even folding like kings and queens if we did check them on the turn, which again is something I probably wouldn't really be doing. 9-8 is an interesting call as well. So I guess it's really important to call blocking some of his nutted hands as well, because if he had a hand such as 9-7, like a straight, or better, those are the types of hands he's representing when he has a jam, basically. I think maybe even two pairs would just go for a pot size bet, so we can check that out. So his two pairs, well, his two pairs sometimes are worth jams. I guess when we're jamming 10-4, we expect the in-position player to be bluff catching more with some of his nutted range. But yeah, his jams will mostly be like straights and flushes, and obviously he's going to have some bluffs, and his best bluffing candidates will be hands such as Queen 9, Jack 9, Queen 7. So overall, I guess both players played reasonably. Yeah, he should also be bluffing all his king highs, by the way. That's also something important to note. And yeah, ace high too, right? Like the weak aces even. So he basically all no-made hands. And I think a lot of people would be checking too many aces here, therefore maybe folding even more than GTO with my particular hand would have been reasonable. Let's move on to the next hand. We're playing Keywo again. Okay, so I see bet the flop. No, wait, he donked. Oh, it was a limped pot and he donked. Alright, I guess maybe there's not much to analyze. I thought that I c-bet and barreled. This was an interesting hand. Okay, so small blind versus big blind. I decide to check here. I do believe we can bet it to small frequency. And then I basically decide to check down. And he decides to bluff. And I decided to bluff catch with my ace. Because my range, when I check 3 times, I'm rarely going to have, I mean, I might very occasionally have like some 2 pairs or sets, but it's just not going to be that common. And therefore most of my range would be capped to like a 5 or 7 in general, or like ace high. And so I'm wondering at what frequency I should be calling ace 5 here, if at all. So let's check this out. So I think we were about 25 big blinds deep here. And then it just checked down. What was the flop? Check 7-5. And as we see here, we're not like betting our entire range. It's quite a connected board. Therefore, we're going to be getting a lot of calls from strong draws, and playing out of position is just pretty tough. Therefore, we want to construct a pretty wide checking range. And when we do bet, most of the time we want to either bet 3/4 of the pot, occasionally as well, like a block bet makes sense. I wouldn't be using half pot or full pot here, because the frequencies GTO is using them is just not high enough. However, with our hand in particular, like ace 5, it does make some sense to be block betting, or even betting 3/4 of the time actually. And the main hands that we want to block bet, it looks like, will be sort of ace high with 2 overcards, so ace king, ace queen, ace, also hands such as ace 8 to ace 10 with a backdoor flush draw, or in general makes some sense to be block betting. And you want to be block betting also like your weak pairs. So yeah, ace 5 and these 7s make some sense to be block betting. Your jacks mostly just want to like bet 3/4 of the pot, and it's important to note that we should actually be checking sometimes with some of our jacks, like ace jack, jacks with an overcard, even more often than a jack with an undercard, because these are the types of hands we can go for a check raise and which don't need as much protection. Let's see what type of bluffs we want to be using. And we do want to be bluffing with like ace 4 with a backdoor flush draw, ace 3 with a backdoor flush draw, ace 2 with a backdoor flush draw, as well as king high and queen high with some type of backdoor flush draw. Notice how a lot of the times if we just have absolutely 0 equity, we're just going to be fine check folding that. Okay, so anyways, we did check. And he had queen 4 suited. Seems like a reasonable check. Let's not take too much note of what his range should look like here. King of hearts came on the turn. We again have the option here of block betting. Actually, it could be an interesting strategy. I'm wondering here mainly what are my slow plays though, because on the turn I'm going to be potting a lot of my strong hands. I thought I'd be potting queen jack and king jack here at this point, but it appears we're going for check raise again. That's quite interesting. Oh, sorry. The king came, therefore the jack's not the top pair anymore. Okay, so we're potting kings. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Important to note that we cannot be potting all our kings. We do have to be checking a lot of our weaker ones. And yeah, hands such as ace 5, ace 7, queen 7, like, could still go for a block bet. Even some of these jacks could go for a block bet. And then, well, with our bluffs, we're mainly going to be using the pot bet sizing, because he's just going to have too many hands to call if we use a small sizing, and our value to bluff ratio needs to be much higher whenever we're bluffing. I mean, bluffing small. So yeah, if we checked some kind of draw on the turn, those make for good candidates to be bluffing on the turn. And looking at our nutted range, as we see, we should still be, if we slow played like a 2-pair or something on the flop, then it's important to be not always just potting it. So especially when we turn the top pair with a 2-pair, so if we had a hand like king 5, king 7, king jack, these hands make a lot of sense to be checking again. And I guess mostly going for a check raise. I mean, I guess that's because if he didn't bluff on the flop, like if in position didn't bluff on the flop, he's supposed to start bluffing this king quite often, as he checked back some kings on the flop for sure. So yeah, as we see here, he's supposed to start bluffing a ton of hands on the turn, include like it's a range of hands that both includes equity as well as no equity. But if it's queen or high or lower, you can basically bluff it very often, over half the time. He should use a polarized sizing. So here I'm just kind of interested in if my 2 pairs want to check raise as much as I thought, and it appears that we want to continue slow playing like these king highs, because he's going to have, like as we said, he has too many bluffs. Okay, but anyways, turn went check check. The river completed a straight. It brought an 8 of spades. And I guess my hand is sometimes still betting, which again I find a bit weird. I don't really see much value to be had with my hand. I think it works better as a bluff catcher. Block betting with a 7 makes quite a lot of sense. We want to slow play some of our 2 pairs, but definitely not all. So if we checked with a 2-pair with a king on the turn, now we're going to go ahead and value bet it, because the type of hands he'd be checking twice back would often have some showdown value, like a 7, a 5, possibly. I think if he had a jack, that is the type of hand he'd be checking, right, on the turn again. Yeah, all jacks. If he didn't bet that flop, then he would be checking again on the turn. Therefore, we would just want to extract value, and he shouldn't be folding many 7s or 8s, and I think he should even be calling like some 5s, I guess. Yeah, he should be calling decent amount of 5s, most 7s and 8s. Okay. Let's see. Anything else to note? We're mostly checking with our ace highs, and if we come to this point at the river with total air, we're gonna be bluffing most of it. Like, even queen high can just go for a bluff. Well, queen 2 for sure. I will, but we don't have too much air here, but if we do, then certainly we want to be bluffing by this point, and only checking our ace highs and mostly fives. And he decided to turn his queen 4 into a bluff, which is a reasonable play. It looks like a pot size bet should be the standard, like you're kind of repping a straight, I guess, so the straights are the hands that want to go for overbets in this situation. And he did a like 2x overbet. Yeah, so when he's 2x overbetting, he's representing straights and 2 pairs, basically. And if he had pot, he would be representing like a king or well, mainly a king is the type of hand he'd be repping. But although pot size bet would also be good with 2 pairs and straights occasionally. So let's see against if he jams. If he jams, my hand should be a clear fold. Although at the same time we're going to be calling with 10-5 and 6-5 more. So holding an ace blocker isn't as good as holding a straight blocker. Because although he's not going to be turning his aces into a bluff, of which he has a lot of, he is going to be turning, I mean, he is, like, he's representing, his value range is representing the straights, therefore the straight blockers should be more important here. Let's see if he pots it here instead, though. So when he's potting here, 10-5 is a far worse call than queen 5, and ace 5 becomes basically a pure call in this situation. It's ace 5 is a better hand to call than a hand such as 10-8 or 10-7 in this situation. And yeah, we can fold hands like 5-3 and 5-4 much more easily. So I think, you know, he used a weird sizing, which could include a lot of 2 pairs too. So I think, given he's not only representing straights, my call was sort of reasonable. We can look through another hand. This is against a fish. Okay, so here my question was, I'm not sure, firstly, if this is a good sizing on this board and if I'm even supposed to be c-betting on 10-6-2 at the stack depth, because we are quite shallow. We're 14 big blinds deep, and to be honest, I think you could even argue for just jamming pre-flop sometimes. And then I just decided to barrel on the turn. A lot of people wouldn't be barreling these types of hands on the turn, but I mean, I don't really see myself having many bluffs in this situation when I bet and barrel the turn. And I think having an ace of diamonds in our hand is also rather valuable, so that's why I went for it. And on the river we hit, so we also had some equity, so that was my reason for barreling the turn and betting the flop. I wanted to see, I'm pretty sure we cannot see bet this flop 100%, but still. So 14 big blinds deep. Ace-Jack is, yeah, as we see, it's a mix between a jam and a raise, so it's not a terrible decision to raise pre-flop. This is calling range. Flop came 10-6-2, 10-6, 2 of spades. And let's see, so he should check his range to us, and actually I thought we'd be checking at a slightly higher frequency than we are. We are in fact betting like a ton. And again, the tough thing to remember here is obviously what type of hands do you want to bet, like half pot, and what type of hands do you want to just block bet. And I think if you look at this situation and you just say that you're going to use a strategy which only uses one block bet, in that situation you'd be able to bet your entire range, just understanding how a solver would think in that spot. But we see my hand in particular prefers to block bet, obviously, because it's just ace high, and all it really wants to do is like make some complete air hands fold, I guess. And the types of hands you want to be betting large with will be like your tens and jacks and queens. Aces and kings don't need much protection. Queens are actually kind of indifferent. Yeah, if I had like pocket sevens, perhaps that could be a good choice to be block betting also. Ace six offsuit, certainly. I mean, betting half pot with sevens and eights and ace six make sense. And the types of bluffs you want to bet larger with would be... Okay, the backdoors don't appear to matter much here. Jack 8. Yeah, I thought that with a backdoor flush draw you might prefer to bet half pot more often, but it appears not to be the case. But as we're not going to be facing a check raise as often with a when we bet half pot instead of block betting, it makes some sense to me to be betting like half pot with like jack 8 with a backdoor flush draw. But okay, we block bet. He's calling. He should be raising most of his tens, like basically every single 10, and even some sixes can be raising. So when he's calling, his range is relatively capped, and that's another reason why I went ahead and barreled, even on a 9 of diamonds, which doesn't look particularly great for us. And as we see here, my hand, it was ace jack with an ace of diamonds. And a jack of clubs. So I'm not sure why the jack of clubs is going to be the candidate to be checking. But as we see with a diamond, ace jack is going to be bluffing more often than not in general. And so I do like my bluff. The fact is, as I said, we're not going to have many hands to actually be bluffing in this situation. We can be betting as well with our nines very often, like king 9 and ace 9, even queen 9 can be betting half pot. We're going to have all like 10s and 9s for value in this spot, as well as overpairs that don't need to go large. And in reality, I think I'd only be using one sizing here anyway. And our 2 overcards plus draw are going to be kind of like 50-50. Most of these weak gut shots will be betting more often. But yeah, it's important to note that we do need to bet with ace jack and ace queen and ace king offsuit with a diamond at some frequency. And then we're going to be turning our weak aces into a bluff as well quite often, simply because we just don't have many other combos of hands to bluff with. So if we look at our bluffing combos, you know, we'd prefer to check back a hand like jack 8 because that's got a lot of equity, but it's going to be very good for us when the 7 comes, because he's going to bet into us quite often on a 7, for example, on the river. So I did decide to barrel, and at this point, like if he check called a 2 pair, he's very often going to raise it. He's going to check raise all his top pairs at this point. And even like occasionally a hand like king 9 could jam just for protection. So jamming a hand like king 9 wouldn't be the worst, basically. When he does call, like his range is going to be capped to a 6, and like hands such as queen jack or king jack, which floated the flop. So draws, basically. So weak pairs and draws, therefore we're going to have a ton of fold acting, but I did hit on the river, so I don't really think there's too many questions on the river about my river jam. Let's just see, can we jam like all our 10s here? Well, tens GTO would have been betting large on the turn, but seeing as we can jam queen 10, I'm sure we can bet pretty much every 10, right? Like, I guess, yeah, 10-8 here is a jam. Queen 9 and ace 9 are close as well. And then on the river, like, you'd still be jamming as a bluff with ace queen as played, and ace king quite often, ace 5. So that is pretty interesting. Okay, so we ran through 3 spots today, relatively quickly in GTOBase, and we checked out some of the features. Actually, we saw one hand from each of these positions, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, I really like this program, and I hope you enjoyed this short tutorial. Bye bye.